Ladies and gentlemen, I really appreciate you guys spending some time with me today. Now, it is Thursday. I usually do buy sells on this day. However, it's almost week 13 now. Most leagues, the trade deadline has passed. So I don't think it would be very useful to most people for me to do that. What I've decided to do instead is to go back in time and look at some of my prior calls on my old buy sells and see where I hit, where I missed, the reasons why that was, and what information can we glean from those decisions, how we can learn from them and use that knowledge as we move forward. We want to be able to learn from what we've done, whether that is good or bad. Please let me know in the comment section below if you find this type of content useful and intriguing. I don't want to bring you guys things that you're not going to enjoy and that you cannot use. If you are new to the channel, welcome. Please like and subscribe. The support means the world to me. I'm at 60 subscribers now. I'm over halfway there to my goal of 100. If you guys have any questions, or if you can trade and you're thinking about moving a player here or there, drop those down below. You can also reach out to me on Sleeper. I would love to get back with you and help you out. I started doing buy sells all the way back in week 5. So for this video, I thought I would go back and review weeks 5 and weeks 6, walk through all the calls all together, and then pick out my favorite ones as far as what were the big hits and what were those bad misses where I led you astray. At the very end of this video, I do have 5 buy and sell options for those of you who can still make moves in your leagues. It's going to be a much quicker run through than I usually do, but I wanted to get those players out there for those who have that option. With all that said and done, let's get into this version of buy sell. Let's hop right into it and check out the full list of my calls for week 5, both in my buys and my sells. Looking at my buys first, you can see it was a heavy week of that for me in week 5, and a couple really awesome ones stand out to me, namely CeeDee Lamb, Darrell Henderson at RB23, and the cream of the crop, Jonathan Taylor, who at the time was RB19. Into my sells, and there are a couple that I'm not super proud of, and the ones that really stand out to me are Cordarrelle Patterson as the RB3. Now obviously he's fallen off of that a little bit, but he has still been awesome. And then James Conner turned out to be a much better back consistently than I thought he was. He was RB21 at the time of me selling him. Let's now move to a deep dive into the biggest hits and misses of them all. Let's start with the bad so we can end on some good notes. And the first one I want to deep dive into is selling Cordarrelle Patterson. Now, I recognize that I had a bias as a Vikings fan after watching Cordarrelle Patterson all of those years do absolutely nothing for my Vikings. I didn't take into account what he could do in a different situation. I didn't have any confidence in him to continue producing at the level that he was, especially because at the time he had a lack of overall touches. So what ended up happening? He saw more touches as the season went on, and Atlanta figured out that he was a big value to the offense. Calvin Ridley left the team, which created even more opportunities for him, and Mike Davis faded into obscurity, which made Patterson a truly elite option almost every single week. After last week's game, Patterson has less touchdowns in his last 6 games than he did in his first 4, but he's still sitting at RB10, so this call does not look great. I learned from this that we have to be cognizant of our biases when we are evaluating players and their situations, and that has to be at the forefront of our decision making. We cannot just plainly look at the past alone to see future production. A player's current situation and fit in an offense can make all the difference in the world. The next miss that I'm not super proud of is buying in on Michael Thomas. Thomas bit a ton of people this year, so it's only fair that I am included in that. Like most, I thought he would come back somewhere between week 6 and weeks 8 and produce at a solid level. Probably not to what he was with Drew Brees. I think that was outside the realm of possibilities. but at least a flex option at the very worst, with some upside to be a low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2 type. Now, I figured that he could help elevate this offense and that he would eventually mesh well with Jameis Winston. We all know what happened the rest of the way. After holding out hopes for a few more weeks, the Saints finally shut him down. He is not going to play a single down in 2021, and his future is currently in flux. Pain. Another reminder here of just how risky it can be to buy into players who are already injured. It's something that we usually want to avoid. Another miss for me, and one that just did not work out, was buying Calvin Ridley, who was the wide receiver 22 at the time. And Ridley, honestly, was just a miss for me all year. I loved him as the draft season approached. I thought he could be a truly awesome value and exploded an offense that was going to be playing from behind and have to throw the ball a ton, most likely playing catch-up. What I did not anticipate was the absolute deterioration of Matt Ryan, or the personal issues that he has been facing throughout much of this season. Thankfully, we were buying him at that wide receiver 2 price, so this wasn't quite as brutal as it could have been, but obviously, Ridley is nowhere to be seen, so this is a big swing and a miss for me. And of course, I had to save the worst for last, and that is selling James Conner. This is possibly my worst call of them all. Selling Conner looks real bad. He is currently the RB10 and has done it bursting into the end zone with reckless abandon. In my defense, many weeks, he was nothing more than really a borderline flex play that just decided that he was going to fall into the end zone, but alas, the points still count. Unless you didn't play him. Ha! James Conner has been on a tear since Chase Edmonds has been out, and that's not going to stop until he returns, and it maybe doesn't even stop once Chase Edmonds does return. He's been that consistent in scoring. This is a lesson in understanding a player's role on the team and the offense that they are in as a whole. We know that Arizona was an awesome offense then. They have continued to be an awesome offense, although they have definitely cooled off since Kyler Murray went down. Selling off a key piece like Conner in that kind of an offense always carries some risk, especially as the main goal line back, and one that I wish I could take back. With my Week 5 walk of shame complete, let's check out the positive side of things in Week 5. And it starts with my buy of Darrell Henderson. Henderson's schedule here lined up perfectly for him to take off, and I bought the Rams offense. This approach to both looking ahead and projecting a workload worked out splendidly. At the time of buying, he was RB23, and he had a missed game in tow already. Now, he currently sits as RB12, and he can climb even higher as he has plus matchups against Jacksonville, Seattle, and Minnesota in 3 out of his next 4. Opportunity and big upside were the key focuses in this decision, and you can never get enough of either of those things on your rosters. Another big win was buying CD Lamb. He was in a rut early on in the season, and some people were panicking with his lack of production at the time. He has since been able to get out of it and is currently the wide receiver 19. He has a missed game and his bye week is already out of the way. I was all in on Lamb coming into the season, and I was not about to give up on him because he had a poor 4-week stretch. He has had some downs since then, but he has 2 top 3 finishes since acquiring him, if you listen to me, in Week 5, and that overpowers them. In addition, he gets plus matchups in 4 out of the next 5 weeks, so he is far from done. Ultimately, this came down to a simple rule. Trust your gut on your guys. It's not always going to work out for you, but at least you went down with what you believe if that is the case. When it does go according to plan, you get even more sheer joy out of not only being right, but being able to enjoy the ride even more. I had a couple of subscribers ask me about this next sell. I had Mike Williams selling as a wide receiver 5. A couple people did not agree with that. It ended up working out okay. Now, this was based on believing this history of the player instead of that hot streak that he was on. I did not believe that he could sustain what he was doing, and if you were able to sell him off for another wide receiver 1 at that time, you made off quite well. He hasn't been the same guy for the last 7 weeks. I don't have to tell that to you if you've held on to him, because he has just fallen off a cliff. He has 2 top 10 finishes in those 7 weeks and 5 of them outside the top 40, which is not a great hit rate. This was a dive into who the player was his whole career as opposed to that small sample size up front. I believed then, as I do now, that Keenan Allen is that dude, and I felt that fade coming from Williams, so I capitalized on it. This is a similar situation to Cordero Patterson. However, Williams did not change teams or situations in an offense, so we learned that all variables need to be considered. Saving the best for last, my call of buying Jonathan Taylor at RB19 could go down in history. JT is probably my best call in the entire season. He hasn't finished outside of the top 12 in any week since, and he has 4 finishes in the top 2 and 7 finishes in the top 6. He's the unquestioned top back right now, and I was buying him around that RB 14 to 16 range is what I was suggesting giving up to acquire him. Now, this is one of those buys that can absolutely turn your season around and carry you all the way to the chip. It goes to show that you cannot give up on a stud too early, especially if you believe in the player, the system surrounding him, and his schedule moving forward. As we continue on, let's check out all of my buy sells for week number 6. For my buys, there are only a few of them, but a couple really good ones. Javonte Williams stands out, and of course, Jalen Waddle. We won't really talk about A.J. Brown. That injury that he has sustained is going to knock him out for most of the year, and that is quite a bummer. Into the sells list, and there isn't really a ton to love outside of selling Jamal Williams as RB20. Now, the other ones didn't exactly miss, but they probably didn't make a huge impact on your rosters overall. For my deep dive misses, I want to start with selling off Myles Gaskin. And I know it is a miss, but I almost want to say you're welcome, because honestly, it could have saved many owners the heartache and anxiety of trying to figure out the curious case of Myles Gaskin on a weekly basis. However, I must acknowledge that he is currently the RB20 on the season, and he's been on fire over his last 2, finishing twice in the top 10. Almost all teams right now would be better with him as an option. I did not believe in Miami's system. I also did not believe in the RB situation at all, due to the lack of consistent touches that he was seeing, and that still really has not changed. But what did was the injury to Malcolm Brown, making the clarity of the situation far easier to read and understand, and also Tua's return from injury, galvanizing that offense and the playmakers in it. He has a great schedule to finish off the year and is likely going to make me even look sillier in a few weeks, purely out of spite, of course. What I did learn in all of this is at the end of the day, you cannot win with Myles Gaskin, no matter how hard you try. The next miss that I want to talk about for my week 6 buy sells is the decision to sell off DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. My take on selling the Hawks receivers was pretty simple. Russell Wilson had just went down, and I was not about to let some key pieces of my fantasy team stay at the mercy of Geno Smith. Reading reports, it seemed very likely that Russ was going to miss more than those 4 games that he actually ended up missing, so the decision at the time seemed obvious. I'm going to take the L on this one, but I must say that the DK side of this is looking a lot better after his last 3-game slump, while Tyler Lockett's side was looking absolutely incredible until he decided that he didn't have to boom or bust and has been consistent and solid over the last 2. Overall, though, these guys would have been more valuable to owners most likely as a keep rather than selling them off. Now, this is a classic case of the best laid plans can go to waste and ultimately fail, and that studs can still produce even with less than ideal quarterback play if they are just flat out good enough. Oh, and Russell Wilson had his Wolverine's healing powers. I learned that too. Thankfully, the week 6 walk of shame was far easier than week 5's. Let's now get into my wins. I want to start by talking about selling Jamal Williams as RB20. And to be frank, selling him at that price was a fairly easy decision. He had plenty of minus matchups in his schedule over the next 6 weeks he was going to play, and he was not in a sustainable situation behind the clear stud with DeAndre Swift. Now, since then, he has missed 2 games due to injury and is now only this week finding any value as Swift just went down for a week, maybe 2. It was a monster win if you were able to move him for Leonard Fournette as suggested. Not quite as much if you went the Zach Moss route, who was another option at the time. The biggest takeaway here is that you need to be reevaluating your players and their situation on a weekly basis and making moves when and if you can, because values change routinely and some opportunities are not going to come by twice. I now want to talk about the buying of Javonte Williams, and he isn't the win that I thought he would be when we were buying him as RB33, but he certainly has not let us down. And there is still more gas in the tank for him to finish strong. There's news of Melvin Gordon potentially being 50-50 this week, so Williams truthers could see exactly what they've been waiting for 13 weeks. He is just the current RB28, but he has 3 finishes in the top 20 and only 1 outside of the top 40 since week 6 when we were buying him. I still fully believe he can smash as the playoffs come. He is yet, however, to usurp Melvin Gordon and remains the 1B, barring that injury we talked about. I learned that banking on a rookie to overtake a proven commodity is never a sure thing as much as we might want it to be. And at the end of the day, in the NFL, you basically have to follow the money, and Melvin Gordon is the guy getting paid. This is more of a small victory than a big hit, with a giant to be determined. Obviously not nearly as impactful, but probably one of my favorite calls of the year, at least so far, is buying Jalen Waddle at wide receiver 45. Both because the price was so low and because the reward has been so big as of late. Now, this was a combination of projection, situation, and draft capital spent on the player. As I wrote then, Miami did not spend a premium pick on Waddle for this kid to do nothing, and at the time he was already averaging 7 targets a game, so they wanted him to be very involved. Knowing that Tua's return was only going to help that slow start, and understanding that it can take a rookie some time to adjust to the NFL game, I was all in on a late season takeoff from the rookie. The injuries around him have certainly helped. I don't think there's any doubt about that when we talk about Will Fuller and Devontae Parker. However, Waddle is the current wide receiver 14, so this was basically grand larceny. He's had 2 top 5 finishes after my buy and 5 finishes as wide receiver 2 or better. That will work. I learned here that when you have considered the variables and the situation, and there is a clear path to success, you pounce on it and you do it with urgency. The reason why? A few days later, Waddle finished as wide receiver 5 for the week, and the ability to buy him cheap absolutely dissipated. Now that we have reviewed my buy sells in weeks 5 and 6, let's get into a couple potential players that you can move or pick up if you still have the possibility of trading. I'm going to start with my buys. The first one is Lamar Jackson, and this is a small window coming off of a terrible game from him. He is a top 5 play the rest of the season. If there is an owner that is even a little bit concerned about that, try and pry him away. The next player that you could potentially get at a bargain that I would love to add for the stretch run is Kareem Hunt. Now, last week I warned owners to give him 2 more weeks on your bench before putting him into your lineups. There was just too much risk, and the Browns have a bye this week. If those owners didn't listen and got burned by him, and especially if that happened and now they need a win this week, try to acquire Hunt. He is worth sending some kind of high-end flex player, but he should produce RB2 numbers once he is back. The last player that I would love to pick up, especially if we can get him a little cheaper, is David Montgomery. Now, Monty hasn't exactly produced to the level that we were expecting since he has returned from injury, but that's okay. That is perfect for us as buyers. He gets great matchups down the stretch in Green Bay, Minnesota, Seattle, and the Giants, once they get through Arizona, and he's going to be cheaper in a trade because of his lack of production as of late. You can buy him on the fact that he has not finished as an RB2 in 3 straight weeks, and then you can watch him do it on your team in the last 4. I have 2 sells for you guys to finish off the video. We're going to start with J.D. McKissic, and there was a great stretch run during the middle part of the season where McKissic had a lot of value as a flex option due to his passing game work. That seems to be fading ever so slowly as Antonio Gibson continues to emerge. I done told you so. Now, after scoring a pair of touchdowns in vulture style last week against the Seahawks, his first since all the way back in week 4, now is the time to sell high if you can. Ezekiel Elliott is my next sell. And honestly, it's just the concern and the risk here with Zeke. He has not gotten double-digit carries in his last 2 games, and he hasn't topped 15 carries since all the way back in week number 8. His last 100-yard game was in week 6, and that's overall. Please do not make me go on. If you can pull another RB1 for him, I would make it happen. And that will do it for this version of Buy Sell Review. Like I said, please let me know in the comment section if this type of content is valuable and informative to you guys. If not, I'll try something else next Thursday. If you are new to the channel, please like and subscribe. Your support means everything to me as I keep fighting for everyone that I can get. If you have any questions or you can trade, drop those down below. I would love to be able to help you out and navigate player values. This is Relentless Press. I am your host, Abraham Opatz, and we'll see you next time.